Hello and welcome to the Fringe podcast. My name is Ab, your host, and I'm excited for another episode. Today we have three guests on the show covering the topic of Rails, the responsible AI in legal services. And this is, of course, a very pertinent, timely, and important topic. And I'm delighted to go into what does Rails do? What does it mean? What are some of the things that they have been working on and have produced recently? And I guess we'll start off with introduction. So Kelly, would you mind just introducing yourself, what your role is with Rails, and then we'll go to the next couple of guests.
Hi, I'm Kelly Raker. I'm the Associate Program Director for the Duke Center on Law and Technology, and we host the Rails Network.
Eli, you're the next on my screen.
Yes, thank you. My name's Eli Makis. I am the managing partner of Vandermeiden Makis Law Corporation. We are a law firm that focuses on neutral workplace investigations in California and Arizona, and a member of the Working Group 1 for Rails.
Perfect. We'll go into what that means in a minute. Lee, returning guest to Fringe Legal.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm happy to be here. I'm Lee Zeiser. I am the Senior Manager of Legal Tech Consulting for Baker Hostetler's Incubator team, which is a group that is kind of a blend of technologists and former attorneys that are working to operationalize and innovate around the law. So I do work with clients externally and also internally at the firm. And my firm is an AmLaw 100 national law firm. So we touch literally every type of matter and use case that you could imagine. I'm also collaborating on Working Group 1 for Rails.
Amazing. And I think we'll look at the dichotomy of different sizes of firms and the impact there as we go into a conversation. But before all of that, let's go back to the beginning. Kelly, tell us, what is Rails? And just a little bit for anyone who's unfamiliar, how did it get started? And what does Rails focus on?
So Rails launched about a year ago at Legal Week, although it had been in the works for about 6 months before that with an initial steering committee. And it's really a collaborative network. So it's dedicated to advancing responsible, ethical, really safe use of AI in legal services. And it came about because of these pain points that we were talking with leaders all around the country around AI and what it had the capacity to do really interesting things in law. And every org that we talked to, legal aid, legal tech, law firms, in-house counsel, courts, academia, everybody was scrambling to figure out how they were going to adopt and experiment, but also they were kind of unanchored in the way that they were trying to approach it. And we saw this huge discrepancy between firms that had a lot of resources to put towards this and other organizations that didn't have as many. And a lot of folks were operating in isolation. So our center's director, Jeff Ward, brought together this steering committee to really just be a middle space where we could, share and talk in a trusted environment without having to be so-and-so from this firm or so-and-so from this organization. And, we also saw we were in a space where AI gave so much hype, but also an excitement, but also so much concern, especially among lawyers. And so the organization really kicked off with 3 different working groups that were touching on different aspects of legal services and how AI could be used there.
Amazing. And I think there's still 3 working groups now, or I think there's more than that now, right?
We have 3 and some others that are kind of in process. Rails has really been centered on this idea of iterating and sharing everything and building together. And we've talked all the time about how quickly AI is changing. And so we also date stamp everything, version everything that we're putting out there, because we really want to use this spirit of sharing and collaborating so that people can bring their expertise and their talents. And so the working groups has really been this organic process where folks have explored and kind of operated each totally differently. All 3 working groups have, met at different paces and communicated in different ways, but really in the ways that worked for those groups. And it's been really fun for me to see everybody come together and people who are not as protective of their personal experience, but really wanting to make things better for everyone.
Yeah. And actually, I remember being in New York for Legal Week last year in 2024.
Yeah.
And it was a packed, I think, hotel room or whatever it was. I can't remember.
Yep.
And it's amazing to see how far things have come. And even then, I recall that there was a huge mixture of people from large law firms, from small practices, from in-house, and everyone else, and vendors like myself. So yeah, it's really good. And before we go into, I guess, working group 1, as both Lee and Eli touch on that, what are the three working groups?
Yeah, we've had three groups with totally different focuses. So one group, and I'll let Lee and Eli talk more about this, has been focused on clients and client data and how we help clients understand what when we might use AI. And so that really resulted in this focus on use cases. Another working group has been focused more on direct to consumer AI driven legal resources. So a lot of that has been legal tech, legal aid, and then the third one has been focused around corporate legal teams and what in-house counsel need to know to examine risk. And so they've actually just produced a risk management framework with guidance that is now available on our website.
Amazing. We'll come back to that. Yeah, so I guess Eli Lee, it'd be good to understand both what working group one, which is I think client engagement, does, but even before that, what made both of you get involved, and why did you want to take part in this? I'm sure you have busy lives and a lot of other things going on. So yeah, what was the impetus for you both individually to give time and resources into this project?
I'll kick us off. So, as I mentioned, I am the managing partner for a law firm that focuses on workplace investigations, and that's a fairly niche practice in the area of employment law. It's kind of adjacent to employment law, and we serve a very specific, unique role. And as we started exploring, and I think everybody in the legal field was starting to look at AI as both this overwhelming technology with tons of potential and tons of risk, and we certainly were seeing it that way as well. Given the nature of the work we do, accuracy and kind of our legal ethical obligations is super important. And so right away, we were starting to look for other resources out there that might help us understand how to process and evaluate the use of AI in legal services and specifically in the kind of work that we do. And I happened to come across Rails really just through my general research on looking for resources. And I thought the opportunity not only to learn from other people who are thinking about some of the same issues, also have the same values around wanting to make sure that, while yes, there's potential here, we also want to make sure that we're doing it in a responsible way, would be a great opportunity. And I thought that, maybe in a team environment like this, we could really contribute and collaborate in a way that would be meaningful in helping the industry understand this new technology.
And
Yeah,
Lee, I know you were there at Legal Week last year.
I saw you at
Yeah.
Legal Week at the Rails kickoff. Absolutely. And I was invited by colleagues that I'd collaborated with for Georgia State University's Law and Innovation Programming. I'm an educator. Prior to going to law school, I thought I would be a teacher. So my passion projects tend to run a little bit in that vein. And they said, hey, this is something that you're doing. At the time, I was senior manager of innovation, being the charge with developing these kinds of resources for the firm and also helping clients that were, as Kelly mentioned, a little bit ungrounded with where to even start, get a path forward. And I thought, what a great way to take this knowledge and try to pass along to the broader community. Because if we can build a foundation of understanding what exactly is generative AI and maybe more importantly, what it isn't, then we can really create the positive change around the technology rather than having people get disillusioned with what it doesn't do, because there's a lot of hype and not a lot of understanding.
Yeah, and I think, Kelly, something that you said, I wrote down, which is a lot of people, especially go back a year and even now, are spending time and effort and learning, but a lot of that happens in isolation. So just to be able to provide a trusted environment like this, where you can actually discuss some of the learnings and some of the, I guess, the practical applications of this, whether it's a super niche area, like you mentioned, Eli, but even legal itself is a small subset of how you might leverage generative AI. So I guess before we go into the output, I'm curious about, what are some of the things that you think through as you're thinking about responsible AI, but in legal, in a regulated environment, in an environment which has rules and restrictions that you should follow for good reason. Anyone can take that. All of you, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to jump in and get us started. I think we could all chime in with a little something different just from our various perspectives. Absolutely, though, data is forefront for us. How are we protecting the data? Where is it processing to and from the recipe for each language model that exists that underscores each generative AI enabled solution is different. And so there's a lot of mystery to folks on what is actually happening with their data. Obviously, that leads to great concern when you start to look at GDPR. Now we have the EU AI Act that's coming into the forefront in a lot of minds. It's influencing what's happening here in North America as well now. And ultimately, it all comes down to understanding what are we doing so that we can avoid risk and really leverage our best opportunities at the same time.
Yeah, I agree with Lee on that. And I think, interestingly, in our firm, one of the first steps we took is we were so concerned about where our data was and also about how to understand how the different language models were impacting the output. We decided to just start building our own tool internally, mostly so we understood it from the bottom up. So we knew where our data was going to be. We understood how the language models would function, how we could modify prompts and back end work so we get a better result. And again, just kind of going back to the importance of Rails, it was really being able to just talk in kind of a safe environment and hear how other people were experiencing and processing it was a huge benefit, I think, to all of us.
I just wanted to add from the perspective of a different working group, for example, we have a whole group of folks focused on direct to consumer legal tech. And we already know people are using ChatGPT to ask their legal questions. And we know they're not getting great results. There's been studies on it already. And yet we have a huge access to justice gap. Where we know a lot of people, individuals in particular, need help with legal problems. And so one thing that we really paid attention to as Rails is just making sure that technology doesn't continue to only benefit the folks that have the most access to it, but that whatever we learn, again, this is why we have this open source, really wanting to share and collaborate what we learn. We need legal aid to also have the same access to AI if it can really help improve processes and help improve efficiency and help improve outcomes as big firms, right? And so I think that that's something that the risk is also in not using it and not staying up to date and not truly understanding it and trying to use it or to know that people are going to try it on their own and maybe have to have something fixed because they wrote a bad letter that the ChatGPT drafted for them and that lawyers will have to then fix. So I think there's also this risk that it's out there and it's happening, and we have to be able to understand it in order to really make a difference for everybody across the entire legal justice system.
And I think what stands out if you spend time on the Rails website is this notion of being tangible, being impactful. And it's quite candidly, it's a tough act because you're trying to tackle a very big area, right? Everyone from the small firms to the large firms, but also the general public, the access to justice side and the consumer part is there. Eli, even as you said, I think you're probably not in the minority of firms and people that are building their own tools because both they want to learn and they want to be able to control and dictate what happens with the data, with the information, of course, because, the clients trust you with keeping it safe. And that's key, but there's a lot of lessons. And as things are developing quickly, there are unfortunately a lot of things that you can do. The old adage is no wrong answers. There's plenty of wrong answers here when you're looking at these kinds of things. But you have to experiment. You have to make those mistakes in a controlled environment to be able to get through that. And I wonder if we can use that as a pivot to go into some of the outputs that's produced. And I think, and Kelly, I mentioned this to you last time we spoke, probably the easiest, most impactful thing that Rails produced is this list of news sources, I think it's called, in your resources section, which is just a list of a number of different blogs and so on that people can just follow because, to be honest, there's so much information out there. And if you're inside of the bubble, which I think all of us are on this call at least, then that's a exponentially large order. And you can probably spend your entire day just consuming information and things are moving fast. There needs to be some direction on, well, these are some of the ones that we think are vetted sources. And I like the classification that's there on, whether it's legal tech specific, it's news, or it's an aggregator. So I think that's helpful. But outside of that, I'm curious if you want to talk about the two other things that have been released just in this March, the risk management framework, and then, of course, the use cases. We can pick up either in any order.
Sure. I can share a little bit about the risk management framework first. That working group has really moved fast and really done a fantastic job of going in depth with the NIST standards and really trying to understand what the risks are for corporate legal teams. And so they've put together this really great guidance. And we're also in the process of working on some worksheets that would accompany that to help people put it into practice. And so I will say that it doesn't go into agentic AI. And so it's going to have to be updated at some point in the future. And that's the work, right? That's part of what we're doing right now with Rails as it is moving so fast. And so it's great guidance. It's really fantastic document, really grounded. A lot of really fantastic folks worked on that. And we're hoping to continue to update that as we need to do that. And then the use cases, I want Lee and Eli to talk about it. But, I want to just say that we had continual conversations where we were like, well, this is just AI generally. Is this really about legal? And so we wanted to make sure that the resources we put out were about legal, were questions and issues that were coming up in the legal profession and not just general AI questions that you could learn from anywhere. So we really feel like that value add for us is that piece around how is it different in the legal profession.
I guess maybe I would just add on to that if I could, that one of the things with the use cases that we analyzed that we were trying to do is talk about the benefit, but also best practices and risks. And that's really important because if you look at even news headlines from early on in the industry, I think one that I always clearly remember was the Samsung employee who used a public GPT solution and released confidential trade secret information. Well, the tool did exactly what it was supposed to do. The employee just frankly didn't understand the risk to what he was doing. So, being able to have a vehicle to say, here are the things you can do, but also let's expose some of the things you should be thinking about and attendant risks, I think was super important with what we've developed.
Yeah, and I wonder if you can share a little bit around how did these particular use cases get picked out of probably a much larger list of use cases, and I'm sure it will grow. But yeah, how did you decide on these specific ones for the time being?
Well, I can touch on that because it was a fascinating process. And I think you have to understand again that the working group one, what was really and is so special about it is we had people from all sorts of different legal backgrounds. We had people from public interests, legal services. We had, my firm has 50 employees total. We're a relatively small firm. We had other firms that were very large. We had firms outside of the US. And so I think that another foundational thing to understand is that working group one was really about client engagement. So even before we got to the idea of developing a series of use cases, it was how do we fulfill our mission in working group one of client engagement, which is engaging clients around their data to unlock opportunities around AI. And we felt like the foundational issue is just understanding what you can do with AI in the first place. And so the process for identifying the different use cases was really a great brainstorming activity among people, this group of curious legal professionals from all sorts of different environments, just coming up with both ideas that were relevant to our respective industries, but also sort of speculating about what might be possible. And we came up with a massive list of use cases and then went through a pretty careful process to sort of organize, synthesize, combine, and prioritize those.
Yeah, and for everyone should check out the use case, and I'll link them in the show notes. But each use case has an individual page to it, on which it clearly tells you the benefit, the example, the best practices, and the FAQs. The FAQs in particular are my favorites because that's where the golden nuggets are. I think they do cover a wide range, everything from BD and marketing to how do you learn and assimilate information easily as a legal tutor, I think is one of them, but much more specific ones to legal, like, drafting memos and writing and so on. Is this something that you find will be developed, obviously with all the agentic stuff notwithstanding, but even increase the number of use cases from X to 10X from a year from now?
I hope so. Yeah. I think our original list had around 50 use cases, really more than that, but kind of just duplicative use cases. And truthfully, what we published, which was only the first 10, are based on the expertise of the people in the group. And so the folks who were participating said, I can write about that. I use that. I can talk to someone about that. and someone else said, I can help edit that. So we actually at this point invite other folks to use our template, which is up on our website as well, to send in your own use case, and our working group will review it and consider publishing it if it fits in with the other things that we're doing. And we would love to hear from other experts because we need the volunteer, the people power to make that happen. But we also have some other ones that have already been drafted and are currently under review. So we hope that we will continue to release more over the next couple months.
Yeah.
And I definitely think that these were prioritized based on how commonly we heard these use cases across our various entity types, right? So most of us, for example, had folks trying to use generative AI to draft an email or a letter. So this is a really common use case. People are going to be talking about it. Let's capture that and help them understand where those benefits and attendant risks might be. And it's just a tip of the iceberg. I think that we're collecting within my broader team many use cases. We've got a list of over 100 at this point. And I feel like constantly somebody's saying to me, generative AI should be able to do that, right? And usually the answer is yes, it's a matter of how. Does it do it out of the box? Probably not. May need to be fine tuned. May need to have an autonomous agent or some sort of automation attached. So I think we're going to see this expand and grow. And as Kelly said, we'd really like to invite in more diverse perspectives.
Yeah. And I'm curious, we have two people on here from very different size firms. How do you go through and, are there similarities as you two have discussions and others have discussions? And the reason I ask this question is I see a lot of chatter on LinkedIn and other places where this is, not really suitable for a large firm. Or again, I'm very aware that I'm in the bubble and I read certain things that seem like it's something that is well established, but then I go and speak to quote unquote normal people, and I don't think things are as widespread and adopted as we think they are. And most people use the example, most people know what ChatGPT is, but a lot of the general public don't know that much about OpenAI, and they certainly don't know about APIs and the different model names and all of these things even. So how do you consolidate and create for the general public? How do you balance all of that out with sharing information that will be useful for super nerdy folks like myself, and then the general, the direct to consumer type focus areas?
Well, I think one thing that was really important in our discussions is our consistent focus on who our audience was. This is really about client engagement. And so even though our law firms may be of different sizes, a lot of the clients we are serving have similar characteristics, and they reflect some of the characteristics you just identified. They don't have a lot of understanding or knowledge about the technical background or the capabilities or the risks or the limitations of the current technology. So I think it was actually pretty easy for us to say, okay, let's focus on use cases that will matter to a wide swath of clients, and then let's add in from our respective perspectives in different areas of the legal industry about what we think some of the risks or opportunities are around that. I think the other thing, just to highlight, I don't think we can probably say this enough, is that this has to be an ongoing, evolving process. I'm sure that if we went back and looked at even the 10 we just released, that there are already either new risks or new FAQs or new opportunities that we would highlight. And that's going to be part of the, that's what makes this process so fascinating and exciting to be part of.
I think if we go back though and look at those, one thing that is clear is that we're not talking about tech speak. This is all written for a layperson to be able to pick up and understand.
Yeah. And I think that's one of those things because it's hard to do, actually. It's easy to sort of hide behind technical jargon sometimes, and it's much harder and takes a lot longer. And Kelly, to your point, for someone to be able to sit there and edit that and say, actually, we can make this so anyone can understand it and hopefully benefit from it. I want to start wrapping up and ask, where does this go? What's next, both for Working Group 1, but also Rails? I know you've already mentioned that you're looking for, I guess, feedback and contribution and for people to get familiar with some of the projects. But yeah, what does the future hold in this ever-evolving space?
I will share my thoughts, but I bet Kelly has some other really important ideas, as Lee does. I mean, I think, as we already mentioned, we have several other use cases that are under review. And so I think we'll continue, at least working group one, will continue to produce and develop and publish more use cases as we go on. But I think we're also going to have an opportunity to go back and reflect on the purpose of working group one around client engagement. What other resources or tools can we provide that will help both attorneys and professionals who are sort of legal adjacent use and talk about AI in a way that connects with clients and helps them understand the benefits and the opportunities and the risks around it.
We're really talking about AI literacy. And so anything that we can do to help build that foundation is a win. I mean, from where we sit as a large firm, we're seeing client guidelines sometimes come in that prohibit the use of AI as a blanket statement, not just generative AI. Well, how do you define that? AI has actually been around for many, many years. So it's in most tools. So if you said you can't use AI and you have to get approval if you're going to, well, if it's in a mail application, are we going to get approval before we send an email? I mean, you could take it to ridiculous lengths, but I think that that is a symptom of folks really not fully understanding what generative AI is. They see mostly news headlines. And so anything we could do to build out that foundation of where those benefits and risks actually are. I think a big area, by the way, for the future is going to be about provenance. We've already seen like China weigh in on the fact that you may need to have data labeling, AI Act as well. And so I think that we're going to see more of that come to fruition. And ultimately, the public's going to have to react to that as well. If you're using these solutions within your day-to-day workflow, which almost every solution and vendor is, and they're producing some magical, wonderful things, right? That people want to use. We're going to also have to be able to answer these questions around data transparency and provenance and manage that within the systems.
All right, Kelly, wrap us up.
I'm really excited to see what comes next because we are at this turning point where we have a couple of great resources that have come out of our working groups, and AI keeps changing, but it keeps evolving. And I actually was at a conference recently where a computer science expert basically said, we're not even going to be talking about LLMs 5 years from now. I think it just reminds me that we're continually having to refine our understanding into that piece of literacy that Lee was talking about. What is AI good at today? And how can we use it really well in a way that fits with our ethics and with what can be a responsible use of that? It's going to keep growing and changing. And so I'm really just excited to continue to see what the network produces. We have a few more resources that are going to keep coming our way. But right now, we're also looking at how we can involve more folks in more formal ways as well. So beyond working groups, can we connect folks on specific projects or other areas of expertise that they want to contribute? So we know that there are a lot of really smart, talented folks out there, like these two right here, as well as you, Ab, to be able to share with us what's out there and to be able to make that in the public interest. So that really true cross-sector collaboration and that piece of education, I think, is really important to us, and we'll see more of that going forward.
I couldn't agree with all of you more. I'm very excited by this, and I think just increasing and raising the standard of AI literacy, it's a great endeavor, and it's going to be certainly in vogue for a long time because things are changing quickly. And thank you all. I'll include links to each of your profiles and of course to Rails, and for people to get involved with and to check out the resources. And I'll certainly be tracking and keeping up to date with all the good work that you all do.
Thanks so much, Ab.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ab.